I am here with my friend Anne. Hello, Anne.
Hello, it is great to be here. Thank you.
Anne Laure Jackson of Sante in Jersey. How's the weather in Jersey these days?
Oh, gorgeous. It's like spring has sprung. It's like, yeah, this is lovely. It's really warm.
Yeah, we still have some colder weather. We've still got coal fires going most days.
Oh,
Oil-fired heating is on quite a bit each day, but we are literally isolated. So when when the weather changes, it's not like a little bit of a change. Like the wind blows, it's exceedingly cold.
wow. There you go. Which would suit some of my sensory people. For
Suits
sure.
us.
It suits you all. That's great.
Yeah, if the Lord ever calls me to Florida, I'm going to question that one very hard because I would not do so well. I know that's some people's idea of heaven. For me, no.
Well, having been to Florida, it's like I could happily live in Florida if it weren't for the air conditioning. The air conditioning freezes me. It's like I'm really enjoying the heat here. Please do not put the air conditioning on quite so much. But I always take an extra layer. It's like, oh right, okay, I'm heading to Florida. Let me pack my let me pack my jumpers. It's most bizarre, most bizarre. But hey.
It is, but that's sort of rather indicative of the fact that we are all different people with
Mm.
different desires, different sensory health systems, different sensory thumbprints.
Indeed. I was asked today, somebody was just saying, so what is it again? Sensory thumbprint? So I was trying to explain it's how uniquely made they are. So it's not a positive, it's not a negative, it just is and is. There may things that, yeah, there are things that will make life harder. So that's why we want to try and change those and help make life better. But ultimately, we are all sensory beings, and we all have a version of how we respond to our own senses from our own bodies and from the world around us. And that is our sensory thumbprint. So
My version of that would be, it's like saying to someone you've got two ears. It's not a comment. It's not a commentary on the fact for somebody who hasn't got one or somebody who might have three. It's the fact you've got two ears. And do you know what? That's okay. How do we work with the two ears that you've got? Or the one or the three. It's fine. But there's going to be kind of norms, which was sort of, where we normally are. And we're all trying to, especially with the occupational element of what you do. It's like, okay, you've got two ears, but they're not necessarily working as well as somebody who has one ear. And that's okay. But how do we help you in your situation to live the best life you can?
that's lovely. I shall look at people's ears going forward now. No, no. Great.
And if you've got an ear that one of the ears sticks out, it's okay. It's fine. Don't freak out. Don't call someone Dumbo because that's just really rude and unhelpful and just not right. But if someone's ear sticks out, it's okay. It's just a little bit different because you're a bit different from everybody else. And it may have an impact. It may not. But that's the thing about the sensory health is that what you see isn't necessarily indicative of the reality. Otherwise, old men would have brilliant hearing because their ears are huge, but it doesn't help them hear better because the external physical sight is not necessarily indicative of what's going on inside the body.
No, it is not. Well said, sir.
Well, I like to come up with illustrations that are perhaps a little bit not what you create professionally.
And that, yeah, it's like that's what I'm here to do. Is like, yes, show me it in everyday language, in layman's terms, because that's how I need to communicate it when I've been so involved in my therapy space and can see so much of it from a clinical, yeah, perspective. It's like, how do I need this needs to be communicated in a way that people understand because it's so important for everybody.
Andy B therapy for the therapists. Could trademark that, couldn't we? Not university approved. Right. I had a thought about something which I wanted to come to you about. Now, we've talked about birthdays and that sort of louder events. Let's call it that. Christmas is another one where there's a lot of stuff going on and there's lots, perhaps more noise or lights or, crackers being pulled and bangs going on or fireworks. So we sort of touched on some of those things in the past and how they can make some people really happy and some people not very happy. But I had a thought about future anniversaries. An anniversary can be anything. It could be a wedding anniversary. Check your diary, don't miss those. It could be an anniversary of launching a business. It could be an anniversary of someone's death. There are all sorts of very, very exciting and very sad anniversaries. But I was thinking about celebrating an anniversary because I've just been told recently I'm about to broadcast my 100th interview of my what we call non-regular guests. You're one of my regular guests. It's fine. We've got loads of those between you and I, between me and Richard Scott, my GP. So this is 100 interviews with people who we do life, faith, testimony, work. That's what this is. We call them Andy B Meets. We're about to hit 100, which is really exciting. But I just want to sort of, I suppose, explain this one, and then maybe you can help people who might have similar struggles. Because as I'm ready to celebrate 100 interviews, which is a huge accomplishment, it's brilliant. I love our interviews. I love our interviews with Richard Scott, but this is 100 faith stories, testimony stories specifically. And it's something that should be celebrated. So Nathan, who deals with all this stuff, he does keep a record, said, oh, by the way, you're going to reach 100. How do you want to mark that milestone? And I had lots of thoughts of, well, I don't know. But actually, and this is where the sensory health comes in, what it did was make me think ahead. Very exciting. I wonder if I'll get to 1,000 or 500. So there's normal kind of, I think, processes of, oh, where else can we go? But then I started to look backwards and reflect quite hard, because when I started the radio show and wanted to start doing interviews, I thought, will I ever get to do an interview? So this celebration, just at a very simple level, there's lots of excitement and joy. And it's also tinged with sadness of, when I started this, I never thought I'd go anywhere, because it gets very confused. Because as I think about this, I think about my friend Steve Legg, who died last year, because he was one of my very first guests who said, I want to support you in this. So as I'm looking forwards with celebration in a sort of covering what's coming up, I've also got all this sadness as well. From a sensory perspective, can you unpack some of that? Because I liken it a little bit to Christmas, where we look forward to it, but we might look forward to Christmas knowing that one of our children died or our grand died last year. And it's these marked milestones. They can be very conflicting for folk.
They can be very conflicting. It would be more the kind of triggers and the reflections and all of those things in this circumstance doesn't appear to be sensory stimulated. However, there are lots of occasions that will be for people, and there may be elements of that. I think it's more that the memories that you have connected with it. Now, we know that memories are often associated with sensory experiences. So the thing, it's as a way of healing that, I suppose, for want of a better word, would be going back to those memories and paying attention to what the sights were, what the sounds were, what your feelings were, where you were sitting, the color of the room, or what the sun was like, or what the rain was doing, and going back in that place, not to stay there, but going back with a heart of how can I use, obviously we'd have the spiritual element coming into that, but then also how would we use the sensory experience to associate, to put a more positive sensory experience into that. So it's almost like you take yourself back there, but then you'd start running on the spot, or you'd find something that was really pleasurable so that you could replace that negative memory with a positive memory, using a sensory strategy to remove all of that stuff that's held in the amygdala from a negative perspective. So we would want to be using, in that circumstance, lots of different strategies that feed both the mental and the memory aspect of it, and then bringing in the sensory to try and help release the power of grief and of negative emotion.
Because it was very tight. I found myself unable to type. I was trying to write something. I had to stop because I started to cry as I looked back and reflected. Well, we can understand that. That makes sense. But I've got this mix of emotions, and it did affect my sensory health. I could feel myself welling up, and I could feel myself unable to cope with what was going on. And I had to go off and get myself a glass of water and just remove myself from the computer, because it was a memory that was quite a trigger. And I was just thinking about the sensory health elements, because I found myself feeling quite overwhelmed and unable to type, and I was writing and backspacing and deleting and writing and thinking, I actually can't physically function right now. I haven't collapsed in an emotional heap, but I felt my senses quite raw, quite alert. So I thought, well, I just need to remove myself from situations. So I literally went and got a glass of water and just looked out the window and sort of tried to reset myself. Because as much as we're talking about emotions affect who we are, like you said, and senses affect all of that. And if your emotions are heightened, your senses all of a sudden, like I've had a bit of an itch, allergies, we've got that, we've talked about that. But all of a sudden that was getting heightened as well. As I was getting more emotionally raw, I was thinking, God, I just want to scratch. Where am I? I'm struggling because of allergies, because we've got farmers around us doing all the fields. And all of that just made this simple thing of 100 interviews Oh, that's September. Oh, someone died in September, and that's my really good friend, and he was a really good champion. He's one of my, and all of a sudden it just starts to snowball, and I found myself with my senses feeling overwhelmed. But I've listened to you long enough. I took myself away, looked out the window, got a glass of cold water. I had a drink of that, took a breath, and I came back.
And that's where analyzing the things that feed your sensory diet, the things that will enable you to regain that sense of balance, regain more composure, that calm ability. It for you, you were able to, you knew that looking out, so using the visual sense, looking out in the fields, you use the tactile, the cold and the water, and just withdrawing, taking yourself away from the clicking or the proprioceptive input as you were typing and moving all of that, all of those associations that come from such that close association that you had. So removing sensory input that is part of the trigger, and then feeding yourself with sensory input that you know is going to help composure and bring that calmness and contentedness just back into the system. Contentedness, not so much so in that way, I suppose, because there is that grief element to it, but at least bringing a sense of more peace and composure is really important. That we find, everybody finds that balance of what are the senses that they need to pull away from, and what are the senses that they need to feed into for themselves.
What happened with the glass of water? I just knew I wanted a glass of cold water, so I got some of that, and it somehow it does something. What's the something that it's doing that helps me? I mean, I can kind of quote bits of what you've said and what's regulating my sensory health, but what's actually happened with a glass of water that is helping me to do that?
I think there's various elements of the fact that how cold can, depending on who you are. I'm always saying that. Like I think, oh, can I not come up with a different phrase? But I just think, like, that's what it is. So you just have to say it again. Cold for lots of people is just regulates. It brings it hits the parasympathetic nervous system to bring a sense of rest and restoration back when our sympathetic nervous system has hit off all like the adrenaline and cortisol, other neurochemicals that are going around and firing things off and helping us and getting us more alert and more sensitive to sensory input, which just is a vicious cycle because we just keep getting higher and higher and higher, more and more and more sensitive, less and less more and more dysregulated. And it's just one big, you end up just a bit of a heap on the floor, really, or not functioning very well, or the brain not connecting very well. And that's in a way the point that you got to. You just thought, I need to take a break from this because actually I'm not able to function anymore. I'm not able to do the editing or the writing or the podcasting that is my norm. So that's where. So the fact even it's cold in and of itself. So some people, they may have gone for ice cubes. Others may have taken off a jacket, and we know that if we do feel as though we're getting a little bit stressed, our bodies heat up. So one of the most instinctive things is to say, all right, I'll take my coat off now, or I'll take off a layer. I just need to cool myself down. So that the cold will do that. But also water. We are 70% water in our body. So being well hydrated, it's one of the most remarkable things, what the power of the simplicity of water, how it helps our nervous system regulate again. It's almost like it's a quick hit to the brain saying, you're okay, you've got water, you're not going to starve, this is fine, this is this is life to you. Water literally is that life to your body, and it has quite an immediate impact on the regulation of the brain just by having a cup of water. We often, in Britain anyway, it's like, would you like a cup of tea? And that helps. That helps things. I think water would be the ideal, but yeah, we have lots of positive memories with a cup of tea if someone's a little bit more distressed, and a cup of tea is a good thing.
There's actually some physiological stuff on the tea, which I'm not going to go into, which is actually very good. There are reasons why a cup of tea in a stressful situation is actually very good for you, but different conversation for another time. I was sort of thinking about, this is what I've gone through, and I like to know, how can we have normal life stuff? I mean, that's pretty normal. I'm looking ahead to something. It's making me think backwards to something, and then thinking, well, how's that affecting my sensory health? Which, generally speaking, I would say I have a good sensory health. I'm, pretty much middle of the road, which is what I was trying to explain earlier. I don't feel like I have particular extremes of sensory health struggles. I'm fairly in the middle of most of the things, but I found myself thinking, actually, I can feel my senses are now heightened
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the itch that I had got worse because we focus on that. I don't know quite how that happens physiologically, but it just does. And something that isn't great becomes a bigger issue. But of
Mhm.
course, if you're not in a place where I generally would be, of kind of in the middle, sensory health, pretty good. If you're not, then all of a sudden that emotion is going to be really off the charts difficult, which is where I also wanted to look at ahead of planning to celebrate 100, which is exciting and it's joyful. But if we're not careful and we don't do that in a healthy way and we haven't got a good sensory health to start with, all of a sudden planning too much, it could get quite, I'm not talking addictions, but I'm talking about how it can become even bigger than it should be.
And that just going slightly off piece with this one, it's recovery time. So this week I've had two conversations with people. One saying that they know when there's a bit more of an exciting thing happening, and they plan for it and they really want to do it, and it's really social. And so you have all the strategies to try and decrease the anxiety level or decrease the change, or try and just keep a lid on the excitement, really, because the excitement floods the body with all these neurochemicals. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative, it's the same hormones. It's just all of this same chemicals, flying around. But they need 2 days to recover. So if they were part of this 100th celebration, it would be making sure for the next 2 days that they really do just cut out as much as they possibly can out of their diaries, to make sure that they can then feed in the things that work for their bodies. They can have the time and the space to regroup, recalibrate, rest, recover, recuperate, so that they are ready then to go forwards. And then another person was saying that they're okay after 1 day. So there are some people who literally do need a day or two's recovery from something quite as stimulating as that. So in the planning of things, if somebody did have some more significant sensory health issues, it would be making sure that you plan in not just the event itself and how you're going to do it, but how you're going to give yourself space and time to recover afterwards.
Because we are all very different. For some people, it's almost like you want to kind of shock them with, okay, here's the celebration, because the build-up would be too much. And you kind of drop them into, I suppose, like a surprise party kind of thing. You drop them into that and then take them out again. Because actually, if you do the slow build-up for that person, it's really not going to work for them. But for somebody else, that shock could be too much. I mean, literally like heart attack levels,
Yeah.
of shock. And it's understanding who we are. It's understanding the people in our little worlds and the
Mm.
sort of world just outside that and so on. And these sort of concentric circles around us. How do people interact and how do they cope with this? How do they cope with that? For example, we have a 2-hour production meeting on a Friday. We talk about all sorts of things. So we've tried to make sure that around those 2 hours, we don't have loads of other meetings or Zoom calls coming in, because it's quite intensive. So that's just at the most simple of levels. It's quite hard. We take little breaks. We've got 3 basic topics that we work through, but actually we try and keep other stuff slightly separate. So Nathan Thomas, who does a breakfast show, he comes straight off his breakfast show into the production meeting. Well, that would be no good because he needs a little bit of time to unwind. So he doesn't start until 1:15 the meeting. So we're already going, but we know he's going to come in when he can, because he needs a little bit of time. From live radio is quite intense. So he comes out of that so he can come into the meeting. And it's those sorts of things that we would, I guess, more naturally think to plan in physically, because hey, we've only got so much time in a day, but we may not put the same effort into our sensory health of, well, what do we need? Nathan, we all need about 15 minutes after a radio show just to come down, because it's great fun. We love it, but it is intense. You need that little bit of time to come down. But actually, while we do that physically, and it helps sometimes the mental health or the emotional health, sensory health, we need to think a bit more, don't we, about the sensory health implications that then affects who we are physically and our ability to perform.
And that's often not taken into account. Yeah, absolutely. But I love that example of what you're saying about the Zooms. I was away yesterday. Actually, I'd done a few Zooms. It wasn't until COVID. I was on Zoom before COVID, so COVID was lovely for me because I was just there ready, and it was really nice that other people could now understand. And they had Zoom already installed, and it was just like, yay! I don't have to explain to another person how to install the app, because it was there and then. But during that time, I really had to put limits on the number of Zooms that we would do, or that I would do, because of the factor. But it's an experience that you don't know until you've actually have had the experience. So I suppose the advice is, as soon as you are aware of something, pay attention to it, because you don't know what you don't know until you've actually gone through something and realized actually that wasn't the best. And that's okay. It's okay to learn through the process of doing things and realizing, I can't do that. Like, we just need to get to that position as quickly as possible so that we don't repeat it 5 times and then realize after the 5th attempt, oh, maybe we ought to do something a bit different. It's like, no, pay attention. The very first time you do not feel on form for whatever reason, look back, look at what was happening. What different senses were you not feeding into, and which ones were you? And for some, it'll be the fact that Zoom was sitting down, for 4 hours, or it's the fact that your eyes are concentrated on this 2D thing right in front of you, and you're not really looking in the distance to give your eyes that break. So yeah, it's discerning in your circumstances which of the senses are most affected if you are not functioning well after something, whatever that thing happens to be.
I was thinking about how we don't know what we don't know, which is not a silly statement. It's absolutely true. I remember watching, and maybe I've even mentioned this to you before, but altitude sickness. You don't know if you're going to struggle with altitude sickness, which is not a sickness of you, it's your body's inability to cope with less oxygen. And you cannot possibly know how you're going to do. And some people who can be massively mega fit, they get to an altitude and they have altitude sickness. It's not a weakness or they're pathetic or they're not as good as somebody else. Their body just has less of an ability to deal with less oxygen, which is, quite a good thing. We're designed to live with oxygen. So the only way of knowing if you're going to get altitude sickness, can operate in that sort of environment, is to physically go up a mountain and get up to that place where you're going to find out and test your body, because you don't know what you don't know. And being fit or healthy is not anything to do with whether your body has the ability to cope with less oxygen. And that's sort of what we're talking about. And it's also that sort of slow up and slow down, isn't it? That you've said before, and we've talked about this, how actually some of those, like I said before, if you're just going to jump into that celebration, that for somebody might be okay. For others, it might be really, really bad. You need that slow build up and slow build down. So when you've got all those Zoom meetings, you get into 2 and you're thinking, I can't cope anymore. Actually, that's the moment to think, well, is 2 okay, or am I not feeling very well? Have I not eaten? Did I not sleep last night? It's the sort of zooming out. Sorry, bad pun. Zooming out of life a little bit to think, well, okay, what's the reason behind that? And just having a little look, because maybe you're doing 4, now you've done 2. What's wrong with me? I must be ill. It's a psychological trauma. No, you just haven't eaten today and you didn't sleep last night. So, it's no surprise. And you've forgotten your glasses and you're squinting. So all those factors, but that's where the central, that's where someone like you can come along, because you're not in that situation. You're just on the outside of that to look and then say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?
That's right. In the sensory super system, which is the main thing that I do to help people, is the end of it. Once people have really understood about their senses, all the different ways that we can process it, when we've tried to work with the senses as best possible, it's then, okay, let's have a look at those behaviors and see what else it might be. Because it could be sensory. It could be exactly what you're saying. It could be hunger. So we call that more the behavior side of things, that they're just a bit tired, they're getting sick, all of those kind of things. And then we say, well, is it a heart issue? Is it something in their character? Is it part of, our humanity that is feeding into these things? Maybe they're jealous of somebody else, or they're just a bit greedy for a bit more, or those are the elements that we want to tease out. But from my perspective, I always look at sensory first, because sensory is one of the easiest to fix. Not fixing the person, but just the sensory experience. If you're going to apply a sensory strategy, it works beautifully. So I always go sensory first, and then I look at behavior, and then tease out heart issues too. I mean, most of that, when I say do that first, it's almost within the first few seconds. It's that, and I think that's what is remarkable about our brains. When we are functioning well, we can process an awful lot of information and kind of discern what's going on and think, no, I think they're just hungry today, or no, actually I think they're really knocked off with somebody. Or actually, no, they're bothered by the feeling of the wind, whatever it might be.
Senses, looking ahead to celebration. I know we've done this for Christmas and Easter, and in a sense, it's no different. But maybe it is slightly, but how do we prepare ourselves for an upcoming event so that we can actually make the most of that event, so we can think about other people, so that we can actually have that joy? Because there's no point in saying, well, we won't do anything because someone might be upset, so let's not celebrate it. Because it's good to celebrate the wins. It's why I have major issues with schools saying there are no winners. Well, there are in life. So let's let people race and do well, and let's celebrate good. Let's celebrate the person that's the fastest. That's okay. What would the Olympic ceremony be? Yes, you've all won. I mean, none of you did, even though they were. It's not a problem to have winners, because you know what? That's okay in life. There are going to be people that are fast, and there's always someone faster, or who can jump longer, or who can speak better, or type best. How do we best prepare ourselves for a celebration that's coming up, an anniversary, whatever that might be, whether it's good or bad, that we can make the most of celebrating that win, which is so important, without ostracizing everyone around us?
Mm. I would love to see people take their own personal responsibility in that circumstance first, so that people are prepared with, they may have a day or two before the event to actually get themselves ready or prepared, knowing, so they'd have a really chill time. They'd take themselves out. They might even take a day off work and go walking or something, or just setting their systems up as best possible. But choosing what are the clothes that you really want to wear. There are often expectations of maybe you want a suit, or it's a really tight fitting something. And ladies, we might have undergarments that change our shape according to what people want to look like, and there's all kinds of things. But it's just having that preparation of actually what would you really want to feel comfortable wearing, what is appropriate for the circumstance, and having all of that well planned, so that there's not that last minute stress of, oh, where's my bow tie, where's this, that and the other, or whatever. I don't know if you're gonna have bow ties for your 100th, but celebrations just cause those kind of thoughts, that because it's normally different. And that's the question: do you really need a different type of celebration? Or is the simplicity of actually, we're going to get a pizza and we're going to watch a film for our celebration. Whatever it is, that it is something that will bring a satisfaction and a way of acknowledging that, a memorial to that experience, without it being overly stressful. So it's pitching it at that right level, but it's always going to be different for everybody. So that's where the individuals themselves need to take responsibility for what they know. If they know their own sensory thumbprint, if they know their own needs, pay attention to those and do your best that you can, because normally it is a corporate form of celebration that happens. So you can cut the amount of time that you're connected with other people, but show your face, but do it with you absolutely in control of what you need: sights, sounds, smells, the perfume that you might put on, or the aftershave, or you take control of the things that you can control, and get yourself in as best a position as you can going into that situation.
That personal responsibility thing that you mentioned, I just wanted to touch on that again. I know we've mentioned this before, but I think so often these topics, there's going to be some repetition until we can get everybody in a really, really healthy place. You're going to go back and say, yeah, but you still need to go back and look at that again. When you do something the first time, 10 times later, you think, I'm not doing how I started, and actually I've got to go relearn a few things because I've cut them out, because I found shorter and quicker ways, which aren't necessarily more beneficial ways. We do it with driving, don't we? In the back along, you'd be, the steering wheel, you'd push with one hand and pull with the other. Now apparently you can do what you like as long as it's safe. Okay,
Really?
apparently so in the
Really?
UK. I'm told, allegedly,
Wow.
which I find questionable as a professionally trained driver. But anyway, and I think we can short circuit to the goal, but not necessarily then have the same joy of said goal, because we haven't used the journey to get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I really like the fact that the teachers are feeding back to me at the moment that they really like the fact that my training is online. So they do that on demand, and I'm there to coach and be there to help them put two and two together. But they say the number of times they have to go over the same video. They're only like 3 to 5 minutes long. And it's just like, is that really? And I'm thinking, really? Is it that kind of hard? But when I've been immersed in it for years, so it's just automatic. I don't even think about how different it is, how different to think sensory is when you've not really been exposed to it. So that they like that repetition. 6 times, 7 times they're watching these videos. As I say, they're only short little ones that they work through. But that was a lovely feedback. So we really appreciate the fact we can just go over it and go over it until we've got it.
which which is really important because you don't learn something the first time. Well, I mean, you might, kind of, but you do need to go back and re-go through it. And I guess when you've got somebody who's come through your sensory thumbprint, they've come through whatever it is that you've had to work with them through, they get to the end and off they go. There's going to be a moment a little bit later where they've short-circuited something which is really important. Ah, we can't bother with that. We don't need that anymore because we've got to this point.
Mhm.
Therefore, we can just drop back and forget it all. And actually, you're going to be going, okay, but are you doing steps 1, 2, and 3? Yeah, but we crossed those out because we didn't see the point. But that's why that's why you're able. I mean, is that something you found that people are coming back and saying it's come back?
That is why I call it mastery sensory thumbprint, which is about what we do about the thumbprint that we found. What do we do to help that person function as best possible and do things that they want to do and feel good? And then I put in a portion that says what happens if their sensory needs are not met. Because whoever is reading the information that we pass on, whether it be the next class or whether it be a family member, whether it be a workplace, it's like, this is really important. You see someone who is as happy as Larry, they're functioning, they're productive, they're doing well, or they're doing fine, they're doing okay. If you do not do the things that we have written down, you are going to see the hitting, the screaming, the loss of concentration, those things that we have set up for them to do well. It is because we've met their sensory needs. So please do not take for granted what is happening, and do not remove those things because you think, oh, they're fine now. It's like, no, please don't do that. So yeah, there is a bit that says, what's going to happen if their sensory needs are not met in the way that we've described it to you, because we've spent the last 6 months to a year really nailing down these things to make it to meet the individual needs of that person. So yeah, it's a way of saying we would really appreciate it if you could take this seriously and listen and hear and actually do what we have come up with.
We need to learn to recognize the twinge of the old pain before it becomes established. I had a bad back many years ago, and now when I get even the slightest bit of stiffness in one portion of my back, I think, right, I'm not going to ignore this because I've learned how painful it is if I do, because it is properly painful. I need really severe painkillers to get over it, because then you have to exercise and force the muscle to work when it doesn't want to. So now when I get even just a basic ache or just a sort of a bit of discomfort in that part of my back, I just think, right, I'm going to do some exercises. And they're the exercises that I would do normally to get rid of it, only I try and do it before I need to have painkillers. And the problem is, if I do it once and think, that's all right now, I can guarantee a few days later it's going to come back, but probably be worse. So doing that first set of exercise, supposed to do it 3 times a day, times 10 of these movements, if I do it once, yeah, it's fine. No, it's going to come back and probably worse. So I do need to do like a week's worth because it's a good exercise. There's nothing wrong with it. If there's no problem, hey, it's fine. It's just a bit of a weird looking press up. But if there is a problem, then doing it repetitively 3 times a day for 5 to 10 days, all of a sudden the problem goes away because I'm getting to it early. That's a physical twinge. What would be a sensory twinge?
There will be many. But it is that sense you'd feel the anxiety. That would be one of the things, the anxiety, building in the body, and that sleep might be harder to get through. Folks might be starting to get a little picky again with food. They might, bump into the door frames as they walk through, just starting to get a little bit more, just less integrated, less settled, I think is a good one, and maybe start to get a little bit more irritable, which is a frustration either with themselves or with others. So yeah, it's just checking. I think we would see it more emotionally first, but it can then have a knock-on effect on other physical things. But yeah, irritation, frustration, annoyance, just irritability, I think would be the primary one that I would look for.
Which I would say is what I have when it starts to come back, because I get a bit of pain, which creates irritability, inability to sit still because now I can't quite settle or sleep well. Actually, interestingly, sensory and physical, there's a lot of parallels there.
There is. We are one body, mind, body, spirit. It's yeah, a lot.
Which is a very beautiful place to end this one. Where can people access the help that you have on offer?
It depends if you'd like me to direct you to your website.
No, it's fine, yeah.
Yes.
We've got an easy link for you that hopefully is nice and simple.
Yeah. I don't need to remember yours. At pure247radio.org
Yeah.
/ALJ.
That'll be the one, and it'll bring you, basically, it's Pure 24/7 Radio, stick /ALJ, you'll get to Anne. It's the easiest way we could think of. What help can they immediately access? I mean, is it like you're there at the end of a phone call? What is it people are actually getting when they come and ask for help?
Yeah, so if you do Google like the sensory super system, that's another way to, if you Google that, you'll find the LaureJackson.com website. It's a bit harder to spell that one. The sensory super system will take you in, and you just get some free resources which will teach you or will show you that there's little videos that I've got on the inside of the website, all the free resources on the inside of the website. So there's a little bit of a screening questionnaire, some descriptions of the different types of sensory processing. There's the Amazon #1 best-selling book. It's a little ebook just about covering the senses for understanding. And then, there's various, you can email us, or there's a lovely team member who's very happy to go on a call and chat with people just to have a face-to-face contact, and she'll explain how the sensory super system works. We've got handwriting with ease, a handwriting program. We've got a stress-free mealtime program. But I'm doing a free Q&A on the 8th of April, 2025. So you could check Sensory Health Coach, any social media, that the posts are coming out about that, but that will also be on the website as well to come and just chat to me about any handwriting issues that you might have, and we can look at that one.
Basically, masses of help, loads of resources, and Laure Jackson at the other end of an email if you need it. Pure247radio.org /ALJ, pure247radio.org /ALJ for Laure Jackson. Thank you. Pure Media, the magazine, is hand perfected with some of the finest writers from around the world that we could find, and yes, Andy B too. New editions are released just for you on the first Friday of every month, from our family to your family. Pure Media, the magazine, is available now. Sign up for free at puremediafamily.com /magazine.